Hey everybody, you want it, I want it. It's time for the Metroid Dread spoiler mode. Everything is off the table. We will try to make the galaxy at peace with this Metroid conversation. Don't miss it. Stick around. Cue the intro.
Spoiler mode, final warning, spoiler mode, activated.
All right, Metroid Dread. Obviously, I got to talk a lot about it in my review. Brad, you bounced some thoughts off of me on the most recent Frame Trap, and so we've kind of gotten some of that stuff out there. But Michael Damiani and Daniel Bloodworth, they are hungry. They are like energy-sucking Metroids themselves, waiting to latch on and just give us their thoughts on Metroid Dread. And so I really want to lean into that before we get into the specifics of the story, which is obviously worth talking about, and maybe kind of some of the finer details of the gameplay. And so let's start with, I don't know which one of you wants to go first, but Damiani and Blood, one of you give me kind of like a top-level overview of your Dread experience.
Yeah, it's crazy because in a lot of ways I really super enjoy this. There's a lot going for it in terms of movement, and I love like the intricacies. And then at the same time, like I find myself like, you know, like with comparisons or whatever, like feeling like I also have a fair amount of criticisms that at the same time, even though I have them, they don't necessarily diminish what I feel about it. So I might sound like kind of nitpicky on little things as we go into this, but there's just like, this little thing here bugged me and that little thing bugged me and whatever, you know, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler mode, I think in particular is the right avenue for the most nitpicky of nitpicks. So you're in the right spot. I'm curious to see what those hangups were for you. How about you, Damiani?
Yeah, I don't think I had a lot of criticisms, even if they were like I didn't have like a lot of little ones. It was mainly like I don't like trial and error design by nature, so the Emmy segments didn't go over smoothly with me on my first playthrough. Yeah, and not a fan of not offering D-pad. Even though it's 2D, I know there's precision aiming, but for basic movement, it bugged me a little bit. For some of the more advanced things, the advanced hidden items, I just wish I could use D-pad to like just. I just want to hold left. I don't want to accidentally hit a diagonal up, diagonal down. That's a minor thing, but other than that, first time playthrough. There's so many abilities you get in this game, and it's using like every face and trigger and shoulder button in some of these fights. Yeah, it got a little technical for me at some points where I'm doing wrong inputs, and I'm like, oh, but a lot of it is mitigated. A lot of the failure that I experienced, because I probably died 200 plus times in this game, the failure is mitigated by you're put like right back at the door you like just came through, and because I was freaking out that like it's gonna put you back at a save point. I think I would have not liked this game very much if I had to go back to the save point every time I failed. Yeah. So kudos to them for reading the like eventual room of like people are gonna die on this game. Let's at least give them like generous checkpoints.
Yeah, that was something I very specifically brought up in the review, where I'm like, it really kind of reminds me of Super Meat Boy, where like when you go through when you play through Super Meat Boy, I didn't actually finish Super Meat Boy, so I shouldn't say go through. But when I played Super Meat Boy, just like the things that it asks you to do are so impossible, but they're very aware of this is going to take multiple times for you to try to accomplish. And that is what I felt with the Emmys, because like there were definitely Emmy sections, I can't remember which one specifically, where it was just like die, and I can definitely see how that was frustrating, but I feel like the concessions that they made helped.
Yeah. They even gave, like, even though it was very difficult, and to me, I'm not an expert at how the inputs worked for the Emmy counters. To me, it felt like you even with the flash, it felt like if you saw the flash, you were too late. It was like, you just gotta like kind of guess, and you get two guesses basically. It's like, so it wasn't like they insta killed you if you got caught by it. It's like you have some chance of like getting out of the situation. But I did feel as the Emmy evolved, I do appreciate that the Emmy just wasn't very one track. That newer ones got more advanced abilities. As you got more advanced abilities, it kind of countered them. So they always felt, every time I encountered a new one, I'm like, oh shit, this is going to be intense. Some of them got like a little too intense, like the one I could see through multiple rooms and then like stun you. And I was like, ah! So like the cloak felt like like necessary, like even just for like walking. I'm like, I gotta use it. All right, I gotta stop. And it was like it sucked because like if you were in the red alert mode, like you couldn't regenerate like the Aeon or whatever the building fast enough. It was like
you couldn't just stealth again.
So it felt like you got like one get out of jail with it, and that was like until you knew the lay of the land. Like the further you got in, you could use it more like strategically to like, I want to get to this point. Okay, let's stop here. Here's a little crevice. I'm gonna morph ball here. I'm gonna stay here and feel safe. But the later ones, it's like you can't even do that. It's like no, it's like I am Sauron. I see you everywhere. You have no place to hide.
On just doing research for this spoiler mode specifically, reading up on what the original vision was for the DS game and how they were like, we didn't have the technology at the time, like really making you feel that sense of unease. I definitely think that was there, and I've seen people be like, "Oh, it's just annoying. Like I don't feel that terror." And I'm like, "Man, really?" Because I think there are like small little touches that hammer it home super specifically. Like you mentioned being in the morph ball and just being like, don't come here, don't come here. I love, they'll have the Emmy sometimes, like, basically, if you're invisible, if you're using the Phantom Cloak, it'll get, like, right in your face.
Right.
And you're like, is it going to get me? Is it not? And sometimes it does, and sometimes it just gets right there, and then it walks away. And it's like, I really feel like that kind of captures the exact spirit, the exact feeling that they were going for.
I liked the obstacles they threw at you in a lot of those. It was pretty easy early on just to cruise through an area and like get through it easy. But later on, they would start throwing the walls at you with different like, you got to shoot the weak part here. Now you got to bomb this part. So it kept you like using your toolkit really fast, quick succession while you got this thing chasing you.
Yeah, and the emulators themselves, like especially the later ones, they're specifically designed for you to kind of figure out what the loop is. So you can kind of run the Emmy around. And Damiani, you mentioned the counters. And just to kind of maybe elaborate on something I said in the review is like the first like while that I tried to do the counters, I was like, this is impossible. Like,
took me a while.
Like, I was just like, I am trying so hard and I cannot get this timing down. But it is really interesting, like you said, the Emmys do evolve like pretty dramatically. And along with that evolution, like, early on, I was like, I just don't think I'm going to be able to do these counters. And I think that's how you're supposed to feel. But I was surprised with myself that, like, I eventually got to the point where I was doing them somewhat consistently.
Same, yeah.
And really, like, this whole game kind of feels that way where you just, like, it sort of eases you into things, and things that feel really hard at first don't seem that crazy by the end of it, which is
once I learned to like not push it when I see the flash, but try to push it with the flash. Then it became a lot easier for me.
Yeah,
and it's
I
so
never
essential that you
quite
get
got
two
it down.
attempts.
So, but what I think is funny was saying that with there would just be times when I'd get it and like, oh, I got it. Like I wasn't expecting.
That's what's great about it, because even if you understand it, it's so really hard to do. But once you do it, it feels so good.
Yes, definitely.
Like I still felt like if I got caught, I could easily die. I wasn't like, easy, get out of this, no problem.
Right. And to kind of going back to what Damiani said about like dying over and over and over again, I think if that like trial and error wasn't there, I don't think it would make the like even accidental counters of the Emmys feel good in the way that they do. And so I think you kind of need that resistance. I think you kind of need that wall of frustration to sort of like have, because like when you do get it, you're like, oh my god. Like there would be moments where I'd get it and I'd like stop because I was appreciating the moment. It's like, oh no, I need to run.
Slide under it, feels good.
One thing about them too, because you guys talked about them evolving and having other abilities, but I don't think it's explicitly stated. But my take on that was that they had ripped your abilities out and just put them on each of the enemies. And so that's kind of the justification for how you lost your powers this time. Yeah.
I also have to say, and this is something that I didn't get to say in the review, and so I'm so happy I get to say it here. The cruelty of deactivating all of the Emmys and in the story and like the relief that you feel where you're like, oh yes, I don't have to deal with that anymore, only to reactivate them later on is so like It's delicious.
I love though that you can actually see the ones that are deactivated like in the room. So you're just sitting there.
Yeah, and I also think like in terms of design, it's really neat because like I don't know if you guys felt this way, but when I was going through the Emmy areas, I was like, oh, I just kind of want to like take this a little bit slower and like poke around a little bit. And then once you do finally destroy them, you kind of get that relief of
yeah, it's like clearing a survival horror game.
Exactly.
Enemies.
Exactly. That's a good way of putting it, Brad.
But I think similar to what you were saying with the Emmys. I think what I felt stronger is in terms of just the regular boss fights and just how much you learn and evolve and like figure out those patterns.
Yeah.
And one thing I kind of appreciate, like in some ways it's annoying, but now that I think about it, like it sort of makes sense, is that they don't just restart you at the start of the fight. They do set you back a little bit. And I think essentially like that gives you the chance to, if you want to go power up, you can do that. You don't have to fight with the kit that you have right now.
Right.
You can get yourself a little bit stronger. But yeah, they were just, it was just interesting to find times that you learn something and just like how much of a difference it makes. Whether you slide under somebody or when to counter, and
right.
With the like one of the things that I kind of do look forward to whenever I do play through it again is there were some of those bosses where like I never hit like the big cinematic counter.
Oh yeah,
And the ones that I have gotten, it's like, oh man, what would have happened if I had done that on Crave?
They are very cool. Yeah.
And I love how you could like keep firing during them too. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh wait,
DPS
because I was like, oh whoa, it's free hits. This is kind of like a nice work because it's like, oh, it's a counter. I'm like, why would I just like, if it's easy to dodge, I'm just gonna dodge it and just keep firing. But it's like, no, you don't have to aim during these sequences. It it gives you a pretty good reward too. It like fills you up with a lot of health and missiles. So like they definitely want you to hit those counters. I do think a lot of the bigger bosses like really delivered for that, like learning the pattern. Like you felt like you get past like first phase. Oh, here's next part. If it failed, okay, now I know what to do in this phase. They felt very good and satisfying. The Chozo warriors seemed pretty cool at first, but they became kind of one trick to me for the most part, where they became really, anytime after the first two, the first one pretty much, this like everyone after, I'm like, you are so easy. Like I literally just like, okay, you're either gonna like jump up and I just gotta flash step away, or you're gonna come towards me and I jump up and flash step over. You like don't have to worry about counters. Some of them eventually get shields, but even then it's like you can just sit there and fire missiles to break their shields, except for like one of them. So it's like as long as you just like know when they're gonna jump and when they're gonna come at you, it's like the flash step felt like I liked it as a power up. It was really creative, especially, but I liked it more for some of the like platforming challenges, for getting some of the optional items. Like it was really cool about preserving momentum with shine sparks as well. But when it came to boss battles, it almost felt, except for maybe the final boss, I really needed it. For some of the bosses, it made it a little like the Chozo Warriors. It made it, you felt a little too overpowered a lot.
Well, I would agree with you that the flash step is the key to the Chozo Warriors. I would almost describe them though not really as like full-on cinematic boss battles.
Mini bosses.
Like
I would describe them as mini bosses.
I guess I was like hoping for like a really good like parry challenge thing, and like that was more the final boss that really like presented that.
You could like parry their shield and stuff though, break, which is cool.
Yeah.
But the mini Chozo boss fights were to me a lot about the environment you were fighting them in.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the challenge and the creativity would come from.
Well, I would, I agree with both of you in a way, but my I guess my counter to the argument of them being too samey is I felt like they escalated like pretty well and pretty naturally. Where I remember the first one I fought, I was like, man, this is really hard. But then you're kind of right, especially when you learn how powerful the flash step is in the boss battle. It becomes kind of trivial. But then it's like, now fight 2, now fight 3. And it's like, you have to do the same thing that you were doing in the beginning, but you just have so much more to manage.
Well, there's one where like just the amount of spaces to move around.
Right.
So
with two of them.
let me clarify, because I think there's two types. I'm talking about the spear one-on-one guys.
Sure.
Because when you mentioned the multiple ones, that one actually did drive me a little bit insane because of a unique situation.
You're right. I think I'm blending the two too much.
Those ones, like when you like one-on-one, like okay, this was a little intimidating, but then like you felt like okay, it's just one of them I can handle you. But then they throw multiple. It's like okay, this is really frantic, and I did like that. I got put in a unique situation because I got through a really hard Emmy segment, and then there was a room after it that I'd already been through, and I'm like, oh, innocuously, I'm just gonna keep going back through the loop to like try and find where I need to go next. But by going through a gate, I triggered a shut, and I got locked in with the two of them, and I was low health, so I got stuck in a part where I couldn't really farm for health. I had these two warriors waiting for me in one room, and this Emmy room that took me multiple attempts, like probably the hardest one I had done. And I was like, I have to go back to it the backwards way, and I'm like, oh no. So I was like kind of freaking out at that point, but like thankfully I was able to get back past the Emmy, find an energy charge station, make it through. I was like, but I felt better because I was like, now I know both ways of the Emmy room. So I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a breeze. And then I was able to focus on that. But I felt the point I want to make is I feel like the game at points did a good job of putting you into a situation where it felt like a struggle, not just like for the boss fights, but like I got to make my way through these areas and like I'm running low. Like, where's that energy station? Because like save points don't give you health or anything like that. They just like save for you. So it's like, I need health, please.
Yeah, Damiani, I totally agree. And to like kind of to your point about the difficulty of different things, I feel like they were very aware of like how much tension they were pushing at any given moment. And so you like mentioned the individual spear guys and how like they're not that big of a deal. And I do agree, but even with them, there's one at the end where, like, I was like, oh, it's just another one with a shield. It's not that big of a deal. And it's like, oh no, like you have to counter, and then you have to
you have to yank the shield
you
out.
have to yank it. And I was like,
that was cool.
And it's like on its own, it's not that big of a deal. But I think it's like that reliance on the twist is like they're willing to layer it just enough, and then when they do go in on like a full-fledged boss battle, they like really go in on it, and it feels unique and different and a different type of fight than you've been doing the whole time. Because like, to your point, the things that you defeat, the Mother Brain-esque mini bosses that you fight to get the energy that you need for the Emmys, like they're all pretty much the same. But it's not positioned to be like this big crazy boss battle.
Right.
It's just like it's just a small hurdle that I feel like serves its purpose.
It felt like a reward almost because like, you finally found that room, so now you can go fight the Emmy. Like the challenge was the Emmys, and actually we didn't talk about that, how they evolve, how the difficulty in actually taking them down, even once you get powered up. Because like I think the final one you take down, they don't give you a straight path at first.
Yes, and I love that.
There's a thing you could blow up to make it, but like if you don't see that, like I didn't at first, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm running around for 20 minutes trying to like chip away at his shield and then get a clean shot.
And the absolute intensity of like when you need to do the rapid fire on their face, and it's just like slowly getting closer. You're like, am I gonna get it? I don't know if I'm gonna get it.
I really liked those, but I did feel a slight thing of repetition where I was like a little too much. I think for me, maybe one or too many Emmy encounters. But it's like, I do like because they did feel different, especially the last one where you had I really liked that, but I guess it's just a nitpick of mine where I was like, again, here we go again kind of thing.
Sure,
but
I can see
I guess it's just a minor thing. It was still really fun doing it though.
Yeah, I can see it wasn't for me, but I can see the argument of being like, I could have done with one or two less of these or however many.
Because there's like, what, 6 or 7? There's like 7?
I think you only fight the one's the tutorial one, and then you fight 6, but the 7th one you don't technically fight because you get your hand power and you like insta kill it.
That's true. That was cool though. Yeah, you're right.
But in terms of difficulty, man, the final boss, like,
so
holy
cool.
crap,
so good.
The final boss actually has a point that I think kind of encapsulates a lot of what I like about Dread, and it seems like a very small thing that I want to expand upon. So the final boss has 3 phases, and I remember getting to the 3rd phase, and there's this like yellow ball that fires, and it's like I was like, this is incredibly annoying to deal with. How do I deal with this? And then I was like, I just had this moment where I was like, do I have enough time to get a power bomb off here?
Yeah.
Like maybe I can use a power bomb to destroy it. And it totally just nukes that part of the fight in a way
gives you health and ammo, which you really need.
It like completely trivializes it in a way that I was like, man, I wish more things in games felt like this, where it's like it is a thing that makes it so easy, but like you kind of have to piece it together yourself. And once you do it, it seems obvious, but you still kind of have to like make the connection. It's not like force feeding you the solution in a way.
Totally did not figure out how to do that at first. So that phase was like really frustrating
it
for
is.
me.
Yeah.
And then I watched Maximilian stream it. Like after I finished the game, I saw him finish the game.
Yeah.
And he started doing the supercharge bomb, and it's like power bomb. Like, wait a second, what?
Yeah.
And it just made it go. I was like, what? That works? I was like, oh my god.
It's kind of a color coding thing.
Yes,
it is.
I realized
It
it as soon as I saw the colors. I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. But like, couldn't figure it out in the heat of the moment.
I think there are a bunch of really, really, really small things in Metroid Dread where I can make a similar kind of argument where it really, I honestly feel like this game respects your intelligence as a player.
Yep,
and it's
it
like,
does.
if you can think it, like, I was watching another streamer, I was watching Soda Pop and play, and there was like an enemy where I was like, I didn't even think, like the way that I take that enemy down is completely different than the way that you take that enemy down, but it seems equally effective.
Right.
And I feel like there is room for that in Dread's design where it kind of rewards that thought.
Yeah, well, what I had an interesting experience with, because I've since Zero Mission, I've loved screwing around with the speed booster and shine sparks and stuff.
Yeah.
And what's funny is right after you get a speed booster, it's almost like a tutorial, but they don't really present it that way.
Right.
To where they show you the inclines and like how you can chain together shine sparks and stuff. And so like I worked out this like really elaborate way of storing shine sparks and getting up to this one item. And then immediately after, I posted that up to Twitter, and somebody's like, "Oh, you could do this instead." And then somebody was like, "Well, you could just slide under there too." And like, like okay. Eventually, I ended up like 4 different methods to get this one item.
Loved that. That was probably like my favorite part, was going for the optional items in the game and solving them. Like I did not look up how to do any of them, which like was so satisfying.
Yeah. And
going and seeing how other people did it, because for me, my moment of that was I accidentally found out you could store shine sparks. I didn't like the game. I didn't understand that like you could like do one, and as long as you don't hit a wall, if you're going up like an incline, you can bank it again and keep doing it. So that was something I got later on, but I didn't even need it. I found it out by accident later. I was like, oh, that would have made something easier. It was the energy bomb in the part where above the first red warp, where the lava, the heat starts rising, and you got to like get up really fast. But you can go back to that part. There's like a trap door and like enemy spawns that keep spawning, and then there's an energy tank over there. And the way I did it is I ran out from past the trap door from left to right to bank it, waited for the trap door to open, and then go back and get it. But then again, I was watching like Max do it. He was going from the other room trying to do this thing, and I was like, he got it eventually. I was like, oh my gosh, like they're like, because that was me for one of the ones up the ramps, because like someone's like, you could just run up the ramps, and like I was doing multiple shine sparks to get up there, and someone was just like, after I did it, they're like, you literally could just go here and do that and be done. I was like, oh my god.
Well, the same thing with the because I was trying to figure out how to consistently do the air shine sparks, and I was like, okay, well if I hit the free aim button really quickly, then I can do it in the air.
Exactly.
And then somebody's like, you can just hit Y and B. I was like, holy crap!
I never
this is so much better and faster.
And yes, I was like, oh my god.
Every time I want to do one in midair, because like if you're screw attacking, you can't do it. I have a screw attack. For me, it was like hit the fire button to shoot, and it cancels that, and then you can hit B right after it. So I was like, that's how I figured out how to do that. But man, it was like, I was like, how are you gonna do these parts? I was like, you can't. I was like, there's got to be something I'm missing, because like at first they seem so daunting, like this is insane, like really, and then you keep trying it and you make progress, and it's like I'm glad they were optional, because like this might have frustrated too many people forcing you to do it, but like I really appreciated for some of the optional items, they went out of their way to craft these kind of like really elaborate kind of like platforming puzzles essentially. It was really cool, and I almost was like, I got almost like, can you make a whole game like this? Actually, I'd love to see that.
Right. There's been kind of this debate that I've seen online that I think is really interesting, where there's been some people that they're like, Metroid Dread is really frustrating. Like I don't know where to go. Like I don't like these hidden blocks. And then there are other people that are like, I think it's too linear. I think it like kind of like holds your hand a little bit too much on where to go next in the main path. And I don't really feel either of those two things in the extreme.
Right.
And so I was kind of curious to get your guys' perspectives, like outside of the very satisfying but very tricky optional secrets like you're talking about, in terms of like the main path, how did you feel about that process moving forward?
I think it ultimately felt kind of in the middle more for me at a point. I got to a point where I was like, okay, well, they put this elevator here, so maybe they just want me to move on, which I felt like would be the right way. But at the same time, I felt rewarded if I explored a little more.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, I kind of have in some ways I would express as a bad habit, but it kind of served me well, is that, after I get a couple of powers, then I'm just like, I'm curious to go back and backtrack. Even though I know I can do that later, even though I know if I wait until I get everything, I can just clear it out in one more run. But it's like, I just want to go back and see what's over there. And it resulted in like two kind of moments for me. Number one, I felt like I stumbled into the Varia suit in the Kraid boss fight. I was
it's kind of designed that way.
Going the right way was somewhere else, and so I just started to go clean up and get some items and stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have the Varia suit now. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a boss fight. Cool.
Had some moments like that.
And then the other one, which I think was like way earlier than when most people get it, is I found the pulse radar.
Oh,
very early. Like really? I found a teleporter to the jungle area long before I had ever gotten there. And all I could do was pick up the pulse radar, get back into teleporter, and go back to the fire area.
Yeah, I would love to see like a breakdown of what you can get early and stuff.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you pick up on it, but like when they have the elevators or when they have like a thing that just the tram that basically takes you to one of the next areas, they are, and you learn through repetition, like, go here, like, yes, take this
Look
thing,
for the purple.
go there. Yeah, but they don't like, and I think that this is so important, they don't explicitly get out there and say that, it's not like there's suddenly a marker on your map explicitly, or there isn't, like Samus doesn't say to herself, like, I should really go here, and I think that just tiny bit of restraint really makes it feel, I think, like a little bit more organic and a little bit more like you are still actually exploring.
There was a couple parts where it put up like a wall, so I couldn't go back a certain way.
Yeah, like something would crumble.
But
it
was
the
like,
thing that would bug me a little bit. Is like one of the grapple blocks would like block a path, or some of the thermal doors would just shut forever. I'm like,
even when it did that to me, I still had a huge space to explore where I was like, there's something here that I don't know yet. And it wasn't like just a small room. I still had to like really dig for it.
I think to me, it's not so much that it was frustrating in the sense that it was telling me to go this way or block. It was more that it feels sometimes like the map can be kind of circuitous in a way that if you are backtracking, if you are just trying to get to another place, you have to go back to your map to figure out how the heck you're going to get there.
That is definitely true.
Whereas I feel like in, like say Super Metroid or Metroid Prime, there tends to be like kind of like these big funnels and a more spidering off from those directions, so that once you get to know an area, like you can really quickly get through it a second time.
Yeah, it did feel like a lot of the areas though, like made you go in like kind of like there was like a loop basically, and you couldn't break out of that loop till you had like a certain power up or pass would only be like technically like one way, and like when you got back, like you have to go all the way back around if you want to go through that, but maybe you shouldn't do that because like you're like there's a reason that was kind of like one way at that point because we want you to go somewhere else. And I think that for me, put it into like there wasn't as much backtracking as I felt like there might have been in like other Metroid games. Like it did feel like there were things that naturally happened that kind of directed you where to go.
Right.
With a few parts where it wasn't as clear for me. The biggest one because I started a replay and I took a while figuring out what to do again on the second time was after you get the morph ball because you're so far ahead in the map when you get it, you have to go all the way back to the first zone into a first part of an area of the first zone to go up to get like because you need to get like the power bomb so that you can like activate the chute so you could go fight Kraid and do that. And I was like going through so I went back to the area right before where I got it, was exploring. I'm like, okay, it's not here, and I'm like, all right, this is a little like because. One thing I appreciated that helped me out in the second playthrough that I wish I would have clicked more was reading the map. on the
yeah.
second playthrough, it felt so easy
Yes.
to look at stuff and identify. Okay, I know this. And like later on in my first playthrough, it did click. So I was going for 100%.
Same experience.
But at the beginning, it was so overwhelming, and it was a little daunting. I'm like, how do I? And they even give you markers. I'm like, but they look so samey. Like they look like alert markers, and I'm like, I can't like make a note. I desperately wanted to put like a note like on this screen. I want to put like I need or like morph ball needed here, or just like some kind of annotation. And it's like,
I kind of had like a color coding system in my head for sure.
I do think the way that it shows up on the minimap is extremely
The minimap is
effective.
great. Yeah, having them there.
oh yeah. 'Cause
Also, did you see the highlight thing so that you can like click on something and then zoom out and see anything that's got yellow brackets you haven't picked up yet?
you mean like the glowy parts where like
So if you
it indicates
highlight,
as an
so
item?
if you go over like a missile container, right, and you click, I think the Y button, it'll highlight every like item on the map. And the ones that you've picked up will be gray
Grayed out.
brackets, and the ones that you haven't picked up will be yellow
That's
brackets.
cool. I didn't do that.
I didn't
And
do
I
that.
think it's very cool and it's very useful. I just wish that they had implemented it with like a list option rather than that, because then like, okay, I want to see if there's any energy tanks I haven't picked up yet. I've got to find an energy tank I have picked up in order to activate that highlight. But it's actually, once you get used to those kind of things, it really does help speed things up in terms of collecting 100% or finding even like, you can even like click on a speed booster block. If there are any speed booster blocks that I haven't cleared yet, you can see those. So
I feel like there was enough room in the design that kind of rewarded my curiosity and punished my stubbornness in a way that I really enjoyed. And I think a perfect example of this is either the rooms that are extremely cold or extremely hot when you don't have the appropriate things to navigate them, because you could still go in there.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of times where I'm like, I wonder if I can get through this. And sometimes you kind of can. You can get through the area without needing that stuff. Or you're like, oh, I know there's a missile tank in there. I wonder if I can get in there before my health runs out to get the missile tank.
So
and
many
get back
times
out.
I was like, oh man, maybe if I risk this, I'll get a power up early or
Right,
something.
right.
I just die.
And I love that kind of stuff isn't just walled off, where it's like, no, dummy, you can't go in there. I like that there's kind of that playfulness.
They're like, you can
to
try
it.
if you want. Yeah.
I was totally brute forcing my way to get some of the things that, in hindsight, like, oh, I should have just had the cross bombs, and this would have been fine.
Yeah, the cross bombs
Trying
are
to get like this
huge.
perfect sequence of bombs to like knock through all of those.
Well, and then the classic Metroid experience of, I wonder if I could bomb jump up here. Yeah.
Oh, and bomb jumping, that's another thing that I really love how both the speed booster and bomb jumping and the wall jumps, like they're all like really refined so that if you just have a sense of rhythm with the bomb jumps, like you can do it.
Yeah.
And some people do it slower, some people do it faster, but like you can do it. It's not like this like crazy arcane, how do I manage to make it work? It's like,
think it is difficult,
you
though.
just do it and you can get where you want to go. And so I was bomb jumping up to a lot of places early. I don't know. It can be considered early or not.
I really liked how I was talking with Brad about this before we started recording. You could get power-ups that they were like, "What? You don't know what this is," and it was like it was more the charges for your
For the power bombs especially.
Yeah.
and that made me, for me, I was like, did I miss this damn thing? I got like 3 of them. I'm like, yo, what's going on? Where did I miss this? I'm like, do I spend time down the backtrack? And then like you get it so late in the game, I was like, and it's from a boss fight. I was like, oh. I liked how you made me like second guess whether I missed something or not. I was kind of like, did I? Did I not? Oh, okay, that's kind of nice. Like you tricked me. I like that.
Something I didn't like in the game, just because I'm like, there has to be a better way to do this, is there were a couple of times where I got power bomb things and I didn't have the power bombs yet, and it's just like that screen coming up where it's like, you can't use this yet. I'm like, but I got it. You know what I mean? Like I put in the effort and I like figured out your puzzle and I got the thing. I feel like this just like, no, is not satisfying in a way that so much of the rest of the game is satisfying and rewards you for
because there's this
figuring
question in your
something
head
out.
is like, well, isn't this a power bomb?
Yeah.
Well,
And
to
I'm
me,
like,
it was like was just like the ammo for it. I didn't gain the ability. Like I guess I'd like to just give you a slightly different perspective.
Oh, totally.
It didn't really bug me at all or bum me out. It was just like I still felt a little bit rewarded because like when I get this, I'm gonna have so many. Like I'm already ahead of the game. This is gonna be great. But maybe I guess it is a little weird that like you did get it, and it's like you could have maybe redesigned this puzzle to make it impossible to get this before you would actually, or at least to their best of their ability,
I
make
think
it harder.
also sort of hurts that, this is an item that Samus has had many times.
Right.
So an unknown resource that I recognize as a power bomb when I pick it up.
Right.
Seems kind of funny to me.
Just word it to like you currently like you picked up a power bomb like increase, but you don't have the capability to use it.
Yeah, if
Just
it
so
said power bomb
naturally explain
offline or
like
something
like
like
it
that,
goes
yeah.
like seek it out or something. Like
To maybe illustrate what I'm talking about like a little bit more, going back to those rooms where like you were going into the high temperature or low temperature rooms before you could get the thing. Like let's say there was a missile tank in there. If you did happen to get it, you got it. You know what I mean? And so I think there is something to be said of like rewarding that perseverance or that cleverness somehow with like some tangible benefit.
I thought there was going to be some sick currency for some like items later on. Like you collect 3, you can get the secret thing. I was like, oh, rad.
Like a little
Then I
shop
asked
where you-
Damiani about it, and he's like, oh, it's just like ammo. I was like, oh, what?
Yeah.
Man.
What did feel really satisfying to finally get and like paid off amazingly to me was when I finally got the gravity suit. For how how long that game makes you be in water without it, it's like
The fact
loved it.
they give you the space jump before it, and then you have to learn to
and it's
use
like
that
you
in the
don't
water.
get any
Yeah.
higher, but like it is intentional to maintain your height to go through parts.
Oh my God, you two are touching on 2 different points that I want to emphasize because I agree with you so hard. Damiani, I don't know ever in a Metroid game if I was like, because I said it to somebody, I said it to a friend as I was playing through, I was like, I want the gravity suit so bad. Like they really make you like frustrated and you're like, God damn it, like this water is so annoying. And so when you get it, it was like a euphoric relief in a way that I
Dude,
love.
the Emmy room, like one of the last Emmy rooms had water
Yes.
in it too, and I was like, whoo, when
Yes.
you got that thing,
Yes.
it felt so good.
I really like
Yeah.
that the morph ball and the bombs were held off on for so
Dude,
long too.
when I got the ball,
Yeah.
I was like, yes.
Blood, to your point about the like space jump in the water, that was actually a point, and maybe this could have just been me, where I was like, okay, your like tooltip, your description here, I feel like was kind of confusing because they emphasize multiple times where they're like, you cannot double jump, you can't like get more distance with the double jump or like more ascension with
height.
more height.
Yeah.
With the double jump until you get the gravity suit. And I actually thought that meant you couldn't like use the double jump in the water just because of the way that it was phrased. It was kind of confusing. And then it was like, oh no, to cross over this ledge, I still need to do that jump. But the wording just like tripped me up in a way that I didn't encounter with anything else in the game. It was just like that one instance that kind of confused me.
There were some power-ups that I was not that into.
Interesting.
The diffusion beam kind of was a whatever. Like there are definitely parts of the map where you need it and you use it, but it felt like in general it wasn't that useful. I don't know if you felt that way.
It felt like it was meant for like just a few specific puzzles to like hit those like kind of like seed nerve things that explode and open up new paths. But I think I could see what maybe they were going for. I just don't think it was very effectively implemented. Was you could take out enemies from safe spots, like remedial ones. Like if you were low on, like for people who struggled more, maybe like lower in health, it's like, I'm below this enemy. Oh, I could shoot, if I charge shoot from below, I can take it out. And I'm gonna I don't have to confront. I think it was more about that. Like maybe you don't have to confront head on enemies as much, but for someone like me that didn't really come across, plus it's counterintuitive to like the melee, because the melee one always guarantees you'll get like the most reward, a melee counter kill, but at the same time, maybe some people, it didn't click for people, and this is their way of like, hey, if you're not good at the melee and you find yourself in a bind, this might be your alternative. But even then, like a lot of enemies, like sometimes the room is just like you're going straight at them. There's no barrier between you for you to take advantage of this anyway.
Blood, I hadn't thought of it before, but I can kind of see what you're saying in regard to exploration, because like the blocks that you have to hit with that beam are always so obvious
Right.
that like it was never in a way that other things were. I never had that satisfying moment of I figured it out. It's just like this thing is here and I use this thing and it's like staring me in the face.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you there. But to Damiani's point about the combat, there are these enemies that just constantly burrow under the ground,
Although-
and you can hit
yeah,
them.
yeah.
You can hit them when they're underground with that beam in a way that is kind of satisfying.
Yeah.
The game doesn't spell out for you.
I think I got it pretty late too, so it gave me a nice sense of like power. Like I always felt like I didn't plateau as hard as I thought I would early on.
Yeah.
I felt like I was getting pretty useful
Yeah.
stuff a long time.
So that was the other thing that I want to add on to the fence is in regard to the beam specifically. I loved the sense of progression with the beam because it felt like you had this thing that was just like slowly being iterated on. And like, yeah, those iterations like on their own maybe weren't that impressive, but I felt like it iterated at a fast enough clip that it was kind of satisfying. And so like if you compare the very basic beam at the beginning to like how kind of insane it gets at the end and how many permutations it goes through, it's kind of like a satisfying arc.
I think it's important because when I was playing it, I'd played Castlevania Circle of the Moon pretty recently.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the progression as a player, and I'm like, this is really good progression, especially because you don't level up actually as a...
Right.
Like,
Right.
in Castlevania, like, when I played that, you don't get as much cool new toys throughout as you go. You know, you plateau much earlier. So I was like, I appreciate this constantly building Samus's arsenal.
I am disappointed that the wave beam doesn't wave though.
Sure. I think that's fair. I think that's fair enough. Yeah. I think that's fair enough.
But similarly, I feel like both the spin boost and the super missile were kind of like tiny little speed bumps.
Yeah.
I feel like you got them, and then very quickly afterwards, you got the better thing. You know, you got the
Yeah.
ice missile like not too long after the super missile. You got the space jump not too long after the spin boost.
Well, Super Missile was just speed, right? It just made it faster? I'm trying to remember.
It increases.
Or you can open a door, too, with it?
Yeah, it does open the green doors.
Yep.
And it is more powerful, although
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to tell. I think that's the other thing too. Is like the super missile in the past, you kind of get that punch to it. It's like
Yes.
fatter
Yeah.
and a little bit
Yeah.
slower to start before, and then
then
it just like rockets
right,
off.
okay.
It kind of feels like a smaller power bomb in a way in other games. Yeah.
And this time it
Yeah.
didn't feel that different to me.
Yeah, no,
whereas
you're right.
the ice
Sure.
missile does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for better or worse, missiles are far more disposable.
I had way
in
too
this
many.
game. The thing that I think kind of balances it out is I really love at the end that like the lock on
Yeah.
like
Oh, I love
machine
those
gun
swarm
missiles.
missiles.
Yeah.
So
the swarm
good.
missiles are really they're extremely powerful, but they take quite a bit of
like
skill to
3.
use correctly and
Yeah.
figuring out and like giving yourself enough time to properly
Oh,
lock
man.
on is
You get it on in a boss fight. It feels
yeah,
good.
yeah, it's a satisfying rhythm to get into.
Yeah, and that's another one of those things that, because I think what's it, Prime 2 or Prime 3 that had those. They called them seeker missiles.
Well, Prime 2 had some kind of multiple lock on because it was
Yeah,
where
yeah.
I ended never playing the
that's-
game
that-
again.
That's where I recognized because I saw the green doors that the
Yeah.
swarm missiles use it, and I recognized seeker missiles are coming.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I mean, I do agree with you too, Ben. Like, I loved when I got the wide shot because it's like, oh, there's these doors where you got to shoot through like 3 things and you can't
Right.
do it yet, so it's obviously going to use them. But also, it just like increased your fire range, so like
Right.
you could hit enemies more easily. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this makes things a lot easier for combat. And yeah, like the wave beam not doing that, but being able to finally shoot through walls and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. It's like it made it so good.
I do wish there was like a little bit more usefulness to that, like more instances where they had used the wave beam. There were definitely parts where you'd have to shoot through a wall to like get the other
I
side of a
actually
door
thought
or
that
something.
was going to be when I got to the fuse beam before you gave me a description. I was like, oh, they just calling wave beam diffuse beam or something because like that's how you get to shoot these like the glowy orb things in between like surfaces. Like, is that how you're supposed to do it? And is that going to lead whole level of exploration? Is like, no, not really. But also the missiles, like, yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think I was nice to not have the super missile be the end all be all of missiles.
Yeah.
Like I was
Yeah.
like, we've moved on from that. That's cool. And like ice missile did feel satisfying because it's like whether it took one shot or a few shots, it just was nice to see those enemies freeze. And it's like,
and then
Yeah.
to punch them and see them
Yeah.
shatter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe this was just my own experience, but freeze in particular in other Metroid games has been like so vital in terms of like exploration and like positioning enemies and getting up to higher places. And it's not that it's like worthless in Dread, but freezing in general just felt so.
Not a lot of platforming.
It wasn't used for that
I
thing.
think there was one part with the plants where you do
That's the only one I can think of. Yeah.
There was a part where these two enemies keep the infinite spawns. Like you go through the door and you fall down at like a small area, and then like you cannot jump back up there right away. But two enemies come out at an angle, and I'm like, first time I saw, I'm like, dude, we're getting an ice beam or something because we're gonna have to like do it. And we didn't get the ice missile. Like, okay, so it's an ice missile, so we're definitely gonna do it. And then like you get an ability that lets you. I forget what it was. Maybe it was the space jump at that point. It's like you just get up there normally. Like you don't have to use. It's like, oh, you never do use it. So yeah, I do agree with you. That was a little disappointing that they didn't use it for that. But a lot of the game like wasn't really about platforming challenge in general. I felt like it was a different direction in especially like Super Metroid. It's like Super Metroid was all about the challenging jumps and like doing wall jumps and crazy stuff just to advance. And the grapple beam like being a little bit more manual and those, which I told Brad I was terrified at first about having to manually aim over multiple, but it's like no, you just hit it again and it does. I was like, thank you so much. But yeah, like traversal, like it was more about like being able to go fast and making it easier versus like there wasn't any real like challenge to like getting through stuff. It was I think that's what like the Emmy was meant to do, is like a different approach of like let's like impede your progress by like making you think in a puzzle. Like it was all puzzles. It was all puzzles.
And I want to accentuate that point because I do agree, and it wasn't a way that I wasn't really thinking of like when I was doing the review or when I was playing the game, but I agree with all of our points that individual power-ups could definitely be like a little bit more interesting, but I think it's kind of about the culmination of the powers because you reach this point at the end game where you're like, holy shit, I'm a god. Like, I feel like just with the mobility tools that I had by the end of the game, like getting from one side of the map to the other was completely trivial. And you just go through these screens and you're just like flying through. But you still have meaningful resistances that don't take away from the culmination of power at that point. Like, no matter, like, even though I felt extremely strong, the final boss was like still like kind of a nail-biting fight in a very satisfactory way. And the Emmys are like kind of an interesting wrinkle there because it's like, it doesn't really matter how powerful you are. You can't kill them until you get the specific thing. And so I think it like all kind of evened out in a pretty good way for me.
I do like the cross bombs. I think that was a nice new addition. Yeah. And something I wasn't expecting. And the fact that you can bomb jump with those as well. So it's like it improves your bomb jump in a way. The thing I kind of wish is if they had just done a little bit more in terms of like gameplay with when Samus like is able to use the Metroid powers. Like if there was some kind of gameplay implementation of that. And the only I know by that point you already have screw attack and you just slice through everything, but
you know what it's like? It's I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or not, but it's the end where you are Metroid Samus, right? And you're so powerful and you have that awesome beam and you're just cruising through things and it's so satisfying. I had the exact same thought, Blood, where I was like, damn it, I want to use this more. It's a lot like the end of Half-Life 2, where you upgrade the gravity gun and you can sling enemies, and it's just like so fun. And maybe it being so limited is part of that appeal, but it almost felt like it was like, this would be a cool like New Game Plus reward or like 100%.
That's what I wanted from the game.
Yeah, and I have not 100% of the game, so I don't know what happens. But
like I loved that there's hard mode, but
I got 100%, but there was nothing like that.
It feels like the perfect thing for that.
Dude, sequel, Devil Trigger.
Gallery.
And it just looks so cool.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking in terms of just kind of like reflecting on the design of this, and they even like when they revealed it, they were promoting it as like, well, this time you start in the middle and you got to work your way out, and I'm like, and I didn't think of it until I was pretty much done with the game. Is like, oh, but that's like the first Metroid. The first Metroid, you start in the middle of the map and you just got to figure out how to get your way out. And just like, and with what you're saying with people that are coming to the series new and not understanding, like just shooting random blocks, I don't get it. Whereas to me, like the cues all felt fairly clear.
Well,
but I think it's this sense of like, this is actually what the game is about. It's like you're stuck in a maze and you need to figure out how to get out of the maze.
And even really trying to understand somebody who isn't a veteran of the Metroid series, because there are plenty of moments where I was like, oh, that's a classic Metroid thing, and you just kind of like smile at yourself. Yeah. They really are careful and deliberate with what they tell the player, because they do, and they just ask that you pay attention. They really do, because they say specifically in text, if you read it, like, yo, dude, like, there are going to be hidden blocks. Like, look out for them if you're stuck. They say that explicitly, and they even, like, make it to where it's pretty obvious that, like, if you're firing rockets at something, it's like, oh, this will reveal. Like, they kind of train you to get into that pattern. And they also have the flashing areas on the map where they're
those
like,
are really good.
They're like, hey, there's something hitting here. We're not going to tell you exactly what it is, but, like, we're going to highlight this small area specifically. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, even from a totally new, fresh perspective, that we're not familiar with the kind of, like, specific Metroid things that maybe you don't encounter in other games, I do think they try to help you without giving it away. But we've talked deliciously about the gameplay so far, and I'm totally open into going back or weaving back and through, but I think there's so much going on in this story that I do want to kind of dive into it and transition into the story part of the game. And I think maybe just to get us kickstarted, something that I really appreciate about the story of Metroid Dread is it kind of feels like a good reconciliation of Metroid lore, where it's not just like darting off in like some random new direction. It is really taking other games, specifically Metroid 2 and Metroid Fusion, and using those plot elements and kind of continuing those threads, which I thought was really cool and really satisfying. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that for years I've just wondered about, of like, okay, Samus is a Metroid now, right?
Right.
And I maybe they didn't go that deeply into it for my taste, but like it's very much addressed. You know, it's very much shown there, and they talk about, you know, this that kind of, you know, basically activating her Metroid DNA in a new way that like started to really transform her near the end of the game. I think it's interesting that this whole thing plays out in what's essentially like 4 cutscenes.
Yeah.
Like you get there, your powers get stripped away, and you wake up not really sure what happened, and then you meet Quiet Robe, and he gives you sort of an explanation of things and some backstory. And then you meet the X,
right,
and reunite with that, and like, oops, I let them out, I guess. And then you have the ending, and it's essentially those 4 main beats. And I think it's really cool how they brought those fusion elements into it. I think it's cool how, you know, even much more subtly they have some Metroid Prime elements in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that's like, it still kind of throws me off, I'm like, I haven't quite understood, like I understand it, but I don't totally like understand the justification for the end of like when she got turned back to normal by the X parasite, because it's like, isn't that what didn't we just like chew through like a bunch of these on the way here?
Well, yeah. So I want to first say, I read something. This is not my thought, but I did read something about that. Because I was like, yeah, why did the X help in the end? You know, why did it do it? And it's like, I guess they do absorb the memories of like the host that they infect. So having Silent Robe, they understood that like not only were like their existence like a threat, like we're bad, like or evil, and it's like, but also like the motivation. So like it sympathized, and apparently it's like, as this last act, I'm going to cure you of your situation, because like left unchecked, you're gonna like wreck everything, like, and also you're about to like destroy your ship, like, or whatever.
If only the SAX had been so understanding.
Yeah, that's I don't, whether or not it does anything, but the thing I want to like say is like I very much appreciate, like as Blood explained, the story doesn't like become overbearing. I was like dreading.
It wasn't in Other M.
Yeah, I was dreading Other M. I was like, please don't lay it on thick, because I'll be brutally honest here.
Yeah.
I'm probably one of the people who gives the least shits about Metroid's story.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't play Metroid for story whatsoever.
Yeah.
I play them just for the excellent design and gameplay. Like Super Metroid's like, I don't care about it's cool. There's an intro. Ooh, it's nice. That was a novelty at the time. But like in Prime, it's like I don't really care about the stories. And it's
Right.
like if you like the ones like Other M, I was like that pretty much like was nailing coffin me. Like, please don't go story heavy ever in a Metroid game. It's like the worst aspect to me about it. Though for those who enjoy it, I'm glad they, gave some resolution to like the series arc here instead of like, we don't know what to do, so we'll try something different again and like leave fans over 3 decades now like wondering about big questions.
It's funny that you mention like not being there for the story, and it's cool for people that want to, because Prime takes a very different approach in that sense, where like there's really, talking about Prime 1 here, there's really like barely any story, but there is a ton to dig into if you want to go and scan things, read up on that.
Exactly.
And so it's like it kind of handles that through its very design, whereas this takes a more direct approach. And to be completely honest with you, like they do kind of front load a lot of the story as they're trying to like recap relevant events.
Yeah, when it started, I'm like, man, I'm reading a Wikipedia right now.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it felt like. And I was like, God damn, I'm talking to Adam / Ravenbeak a lot. And I was like, I had that sinking feeling of like, oh no, they're gonna other M this. And then they don't. They don't.
No, they don't.
Which is really, really nice. And it is super sparse. But I think what's cool about it is I think if you're not familiar with the Metroid lore, I think they catch you up enough and are tight enough with their storytelling that you could still walk away with some things. But if you are a Metroid fan, there are just like really cool moments. Like I didn't know Kraid was in the game, and so when Kraid showed up, I was like, oh, that's neat. And I loved how heavily and directly the Chozo are involved.
Me
and
too,
when
yeah.
Samus
It was awesome.
starts speaking Chozo.
Okay, I wanted to bring that up
That
because
is freaking nuts.
Yes.
I thought about Zelda, and I'm like, if they're gonna ever make Link talk, they need to handle it like this.
It was handled so
very
well.
sparse.
Yes.
Well, the fact that I
Yes.
started to pick up that like this isn't just gibberish.
It's
No,
not.
no.
Like I was
Castilian.
like starting
Yeah.
to recognize words
Right.
because they had certain proper names and stuff that they would say, and I'm like, okay, well wait, they just repeated that word because the subtitles just sort of like help you work it out. Like, oh,
Right.
dang.
And it's like one of those things, right? And I think it kind of goes back to like a point of praise that I bring up with Metroid Dread again and again and again, where it's like I said in my review that there isn't a lot of story, but the story that is there feels purposeful. And it's like this small little touch, like I'm sure to a lot of players, like when Samus starts speaking Chozo, it's not that big of a deal, and it doesn't last that long, but if you care, you're kind of like, whoa, cool.
Yeah.
And just like the process of her becoming more Metroid-like and what that means when you think about the struggles that she's had throughout her life combating these creatures and how they're tied to the people that raised her and all of this stuff. It's like it all means a lot, and there's actually depth to get in there, but it doesn't have to like get in your face, stop you completely, and explain all of it. You kind of just naturally go through it. It really, I think, conquers the show don't tell philosophy pretty well.
It's not really a story moment, but holy crap, when Ravenbeak just rips off his other wing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, what a flex.
I immediately thought of he gave me strong Sephiroth
Yep,
vibes.
me too. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, obviously.
Isn't that?
But it's funny because as many times as like we've seen Chozo and we've they've been the bird people, you never really thought of them as having wings.
Yeah.
And so you have that moment in the boss fight. It's like, oh crap, yeah,
Right.
of course.
Speaking of Ravenbeak, this was something that I've thought about, and maybe, I just personally haven't come to a satisfactory answer, and maybe you guys can help me out, because, like, I love when Adam / Ravenbeak is talking to you, like, posing as Adam, and he's like, you are not ready to fight me yet. You will get destroyed. I kind of loved those moments. And I understand that Ravenbeak is trying to fully awaken, the Metroid powers that Samus has within her. But I'm like, even if that were true, you are like helpful in a way that doesn't goes beyond just that desire. Like you are specific with what like Samus needs for like her suit and the upgrades in a way that like
Sure.
I don't. There's a little bit of a disconnect that makes like re-examining those early Adam segments
Here's
a little weird.
My headcanon is they're the warrior like tribe of the Chozo.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, he's trying to make her strong.
Sure, he wants
the
a worthy
peak fight. Yeah, Vegeta style.
Yeah, I can get that. I can get behind that. I think that's a good explanation, actually.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I had noticed that I thought was a little weird, and maybe it was there as a clue, or maybe they just didn't want to worry about it, but I thought the whole reason that you needed the network stations is because you're just so deep underground.
Right.
And so then once I'm out in the open air, like, shouldn't I be able to just communicate with Adam at this point and the ship's computer and all that? Mm-hmm. Also, we didn't really talk too much about environments, but the freaking Chozo Palace, the Ferenia, such a cool area.
Mm-hmm.
And
the ship at the end too.
Yes, the ship at the end was very cool. Talking about like kind of the Chozo areas. Again, like that show Don't Tell thing that I was talking about earlier, like when you're running by and like the statues just kind of crumble and it's just like, oh, this is just communicating that this is like a bygone period, like this is an ancient place, and just they communicate like it's history just naturally as you're exploring in a really, really cool way.
Yeah.
That I loved.
And that's the fact that so much of the world and like the enemy design and stuff changes when the X get let loose.
Yes.
It's like they really thought through like every enemy type and like, okay, what are we going to do to make this thing look funky and zombified? The Chozo warriors. It's funny because, you know, with the difficulty thing, I saw people are trying to avoid comparing it to Dark Souls, and then the spear guy is like, this is directly a Dark Souls kind of enemy right here. It's like zombified warrior.
Right.
Spewing blackness at you.
Yeah, Abyss stuff.
Yeah, but I the Dark Souls difficulty comparisons are just like...
Well, it's just like every game that's challenging now.
Yeah, but
because it's not really at all. Yeah,
right.
It's not like
I think it just undermines, like... I feel like this is difficult in a way that a Metroid game should be. It doesn't feel like it's trying to take... Because, like, this is not an insult to this game, but, like, Hollow Knight is very deliberately and consciously taking a Metroid design and a Dark Souls design and blending it into this new, very special, very amazing thing. Whereas Metroid Dread is not trying to shove Dark Souls things into it. It just is elaborating on Metroid design of the past.
Yeah,
right?
so it's like, let's lean into it.
Right, and I think that that's super cool. But speaking of exploration and stuff that felt a little weird to me, and again, this is something where I'm like, maybe I just haven't thought of this here, but they really emphasize, like, you need to get on your ship and you need to get out of here. But then you, like, get to the area where your ship is, and the story kind of pivots, and it's like, don't worry about getting on your ship anymore. And it's just, like, kind of this weird, and I don't know if I'm articulating this well enough, but, like, they kind of set you on this goal, get to your ship, and then I feel like that goal kind of goes away in a weird way until
like,
it's like you need to get there.
And it's
again.
still on your map, but then it's like, oh, I guess it's just a locked door.
Right. It just felt like it was weirdly hanging on in a strange way.
Yeah, I was expecting like you're gonna get to your ship and it's like sabotaged or something. I was like,
Right.
this is like, oh yeah,
cool.
this is like, okay, you're
Right.
not. Yeah, like this is gonna be like a little bait and switch right here. I did like the flow of the environments though, because like as you're going up, like you think you go up at a point, it's like no, you gotta go left, and like we're going up, and then we're gonna go there. No, you're going down right. It's like, I was like, okay, you're teasing me pretty well here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. The environments, like as you said, like some are pretty good. Some to me did feel a little underwhelming. Like it might just be like the graphic engine they're using because they're presenting it from a 2D perspective for so much of the game. But every time it went into third person with like some depth, I was like, I wish I really could see more detail in these rooms because like they obviously put a lot of work into some of this. But from a side perspective, some of the environments didn't look very unique to me. They felt kind of bland. But then there were moments like when you arrive in, was it Berenia? I keep forgetting the name, but like that train arrival when it's stormy and like the waves crash. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Like and then like the rest of when you're under the water, and then like some of like the more lush like kind of like jungle-ish area.
The jungle
like,
area is my favorite
like,
area.
This is pretty cool. So like. Yeah, I think it's just a problem with space games, like doing space station or space lab type environments. It always just kind of like looks bad or generic.
Yeah, I think that's that was one of my criticisms from seeing it, and it's abated somewhat by the more organic areas. But I do feel there is just something to the engine or the visual style that it feels a little bit more clinical to me than I would like. And just like in some of the opening caves, like I just saw parts with like these just like harsh angles, and like, do we really like? Do you need that to like have performance up? I kind of get it if you do, but it's just. I would have loved things to feel a little bit more natural, and unless you were inside of a factory or an Emmy room or something like that.
I really don't disagree with that. I think what prevented that from being a problem for me is, I think the more interesting and I guess creative areas that you get to, I feel like almost purposefully happen later on in the game, and so when you do kind of finally like break through, it's almost like a Wizard of Oz, like going from black and white to color moment where you're like, oh wow, like this is so different from everything else I encountered that it makes it more exciting as a result. But speaking to your complaints of the environments, like I think they were used well here, but it almost feels like, well, it's Metroid, so we have to have lava areas, we have to have ice areas, and it's just like, almost no matter what you do, this just isn't interesting anymore. And so I almost wish like they could maybe present those kind of ideas about like being environmentally hazardous, but do it in a way that is a bit more creative than
Poison Swamp.
Yeah.
One thing that I do,
Oh God.
the one thing I do like though is just there weren't a lot of points when this happened, but when the environments would kind of change, like when you go into those dark areas and you'd have to power them up. When the zones that you are used to froze over and you have to figure out how to go through it.
That was cool.
The evolution
that was
thing
my
was
favorite
pretty
boss.
good. I wish they would leaned a little bit more into that, because they did the whole temperature thing. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be cool, and it was cool for the parts they did, but
also the parts where Berenia was a place where they had like this big metal thing up there, and you kind of knocked it down and it just crushed through. So you opened up another path, but blocked the one that you used to get there.
Those are pretty cool. Yeah,
I really, really like stuff like that. That's a little bit more interesting than just shooting blocks.
Yeah. I wonder if that was probably part of the compromise, because you're mentioning about like maybe it was like a performance thing. Is that like to do some of these more interesting like evolution of the environments, they couldn't go too crazy with how like outlandish they could look, because it's like you got to do these effects now where you got to change them. It's like it's a little ridiculous, but.
Needed that Switch Pro.
Yeah, it is kind of such an obvious point, but I really did feel it throughout the duration of my playthrough, is because the game gets into such a good flow, the times where you are like in the loading screen transitioning to another area, you're just like, like it's just like
a grinding halt.
It just comes to a grinding halt, and you're just like, I wish like the tech was there so this could just be seamless. Yeah.
Like at least they look cool, I guess.
They do. They put in some effort into the presentation for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. But
I hear you though.
And even just like with that presentation, like because it's loading, it like stutters as you're looking at it.
Right. And then the other thing to me, which I'm on the fence in terms of like but I guess overall I would say it's a little bit of a disappointment. It's just the music. I think the music is okay. I do like that they used mostly new music except for the cutscenes, because I think that's something that was starting to get on my nerves. Is that as time went on, it was like we're going to reuse the hits.
Oh, definitely.
But and what's there is okay, but there was nothing that like hit me in the same way.
I can't even remember a lot of it. Like
as
I remember
my
it was
first
fine
time going into
when
Brinstar, or my first time getting into Phendrana Drifts.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's definitely
don't have
not
like
that
that
good.
timeless classic element that I'm used to from like the best Metroid games.
I agree, and it's funny because like all you have to do is say Phendrana Drifts, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. There's like nothing. There's nothing that good. And so I definitely agree with you, but I think for me the music was like was at the very least effective in creating a different feel for each of the areas and having enough restraint that it didn't take away from kind of that feeling of isolation or that feeling of loneliness that I want from Metroid. It wasn't too dominating.
It's not a Mega Man track.
Yeah,
and it shouldn't be.
Yes, right. Exactly. It didn't like cross that line. It felt like it was like good enough in accentuating the feeling. But I with your Metroid Prime comparison, I do agree. Yeah, man, we've talked a lot about Metroid Dread. I'm sure if we sat here brainstorming, there's definitely more that we can think of. But I think this is like a fairly comprehensive talk about all of the different elements. Before we wrap up, are there any major points that you haven't gotten to say that you want to bring up still?
No, I mean, it just felt good to play a 2D Metroid game. Like, obviously there's Samus Returns, but a brand new one.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's been a long time for me, so it was nice to come back.
It's just been a long time.
It's just been a long time, yeah.
In general.
Yeah, it definitely built upon what they started with the Mercury Steam's last effort with the Metroid 2 remake, and this definitely felt like a step up. And it's like, I almost like to, like, you know what, I wouldn't mind to give them another one and see like how much they can even improve off of this one. I think they're getting up to that higher echelon potentially, which is funny to see how far they've come from the 2D Castlevania. You gotta start. Sometimes people gotta start somewhere.
Right.
So I was very impressed. I maybe wasn't as high on it as like some of the like other people were talking about it. I mean, I think it's very good, and that says a lot. The only small nitpick of this is like a Nintendo-wide nitpick, and it just came out again because we're talking about like controls and like me wishing to use a D-pad. Like, I really wish these games just give you an option to remap all the buttons. Like Super Metroid lets you do it. It's like, where have you guys gone? Why are we going backwards where I can't just pick what I want from my layout and stuff? It's like, I really don't get what Nintendo's version
clicking the stick
is.
for the speed booster is not my favorite
exactly.
thing.
That was one of the biggest ones. Was clicking the stick.
I agree
was like,
with you there.
Please let me make it a trigger. Why can I have to like make me enlarge the map with the R3 or something? Like, why is
Or even just, again, Super Metroid style, like having the missiles be a toggle rather than a hold down the thing the whole time. Yeah,
like stuff like that. Yeah. And I don't know if that was Mercury Steam's call or Nintendo's call, but if they do it again, please consider just letting, because that definitely for a game like this, with how many diverse play styles there are and the approach to this game, we're talking about all the different ways you can play this game. It just kind of falls in line with that mentality. It's like one of the smaller things I think would just like improve the quality of life of this game by a good amount for someone like me.
For me, I'm just like really pleasantly surprised. I was skeptical, especially since we've had so many great Metroidvanias, even like Axiom Verge 2 a few months ago.
It's almost unbelievable.
It was like, is Metroid, not going to be the best Metroidvania of the year? And it really does feel like they've pulled it off. And for me, more than anything, is just the feeling of the game. The feeling of using things like the speed booster, the feeling of bombs, the feeling of wall jumps, just the overall performance. Like, I know that you've gotten a couple of weird spots where the frame rate would dip a little here and there.
It seems like it's been very inconsistent for people in a way where, like, if I experience a bad frame rate in this one area, you might not.
Right.
So
it's not bright town.
But in general, it's a very fluid, snappy game, and that makes so much difference for what they ask you to do.
Yeah. One last point that I want to bring up that I didn't bring up on Frame Trap that I think is worth saying is, and like I'm definitely guilty of this too, but after playing through Metroid Dread, it makes me realize like just how wrong it is. Where like I definitely feel like there is this general bias against Mercury Steam because they're not Nintendo proper. They didn't make Super Metroid, and I think there's just this desire to be like extra critical of them. But I think what is so impressive about them is like it doesn't seem like it's affecting them at all. Like if you compare this to Samus Returns, like directly to that game, there are very fair criticisms that you can levy against that game that like they listen to.
Right.
They really have been able to process feedback in such a way that they're not letting maybe like the more unfair criticisms or biases against them affect the quality of what they're making, and they're able to inwardly reflect in a way where they're like, how can we improve here? And they really did it. Like so many of the biggest sticking points against Samus Returns I really don't feel like are present in Metroid Dread. And so that makes me even more excited because I feel like Metroid Dread is like so much better than Samus Returns. It's like the next one that they're going to make.
What are they going to learn?
Holy cow. And so I just have a lot of respect and admiration for that sense of growth that they're showing. I think that's really cool.
It made me feel really happy where the franchise is at right now. It's like, obviously Metroid Prime 4 is not out, but it's Retro who did the first three. So I'm like, I'm feeling pretty good about Metroid right
and
now.
also they made,
and just like
Freeze
amazing
and all that.
Donkey Kong games. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, honestly, it feels like we're getting water in the desert with Metroid Dread, and it's just like you were saying, Brett, it's made me even more excited for Prime 4. But it's also, in a way, raised the stakes.
It has, yeah.
Yeah, it totally has.
I can't wait to see what they do in a 3D space now.
Yes. But god damn, it's just so much fun, like, having the privilege of getting on a desk and geeking out about Metroid with other people who care about it. And so, like, I cannot wait for the Prime 4 spoiler mode and getting on and gushing about it. But hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for supporting us. We need that support to continue doing stuff like this. And yeah, we'll see you in the next spoiler mode.